Welcome to Sound Advice with Phyllis Nichols. This podcast is for women and the men who love them, who are determined to make a difference in the world. You'll hear from other women who followed their own path to success, who are willing to share what they've learned along the way. Be ready to laugh, learn, and be inspired. Who knows, your story could be next. Your host, Phyllis Nichols, will make sure you see the possibilities in your own life, and even better, give you proven strategies to get you from where you are to where you want to be.
Hi, welcome to the Sound Advice podcast with Phyllis Nichols. It's great to have you here today. We're going to talk a little bit about perfectionism. The reason that I picked this topic is because it's come up in almost every interview that I've done, and it's certainly something that I deal with our clients all the time. Now, obviously, striving to do your best on any project is commendable and worthwhile, and no one, especially me, is suggesting that you phone it in or settle for something that's not your best. So let's just all agree that's not what we're talking about when we talk about the perfectionist thing. When you are stuck and unable to take effective action because something has to be perfect or it's not perfect yet, that's the type of thing that we're talking about. And everybody's been there. We've all had something that we've become obsessed over that has to be just right, or there's this ideal we're trying to reach that's just really not reality. It's sort of this idea of something or this perfectionism approach that we want to see that's just really not possible. And what makes perfectionism so insidious is that it causes you or pushes you to force on the negative. Like 95% of things could be beautiful and lovely and the way that you want them to be. But we're not finding any satisfaction because as the perfectionist, we're only seeing that 5% or 10% that's not what we want it to be. You know, at its worst, focusing on things in that way in our life can cause lasting problems and even lead to depression and contribute to low self-worth. So it's a pretty serious issue. As a small business owner or entrepreneur, perfectionism can take an even larger toll. When you're doing most things for yourself or you just feel responsible for the success of the business yourself, even if you're not doing all of the tasks, it's understandable that you want everything to be perfect. I totally get that, and I've been there. Perfectionism also is this path to sort of burning out and frustration. It sometimes even contributes to failure because you really can't focus your energy in the most effective way. I've divided perfectionism into sort of two types, and I want to talk about that a little bit and talk about some strategies that I've been able to put into place and other people have shared with me that have really helped them. You know, the first type of perfectionism I'm going to talk about is, that person that wears their perfectionism as a badge of honor almost. It's really tied to their identity. They're known as the person who's perfect and everything's got to be just right. If it's you and if you're like that, I'm not being critical at all or judgmental because you probably are great at lots of things and no doubt you're excelling at life and people love that about you. But it also has to be exhausting, and even worse, if you need help, you're likely not to ask. And your friends and coworkers and people who support you, we're not going to offer very easily either. It's really hard to offer help to you because, number one, we're afraid you're going to just turn us down, and nobody likes to be rejected. And number two, we're afraid we can't do the work to please you or can't do whatever that is to your standard and you're not going to be happy. It's a really hard thing to deal with. So my encouragement to you would be to take the badge off. Just admit that you cannot do it all. At least you can't do it all perfectly. You don't have to admit to a lot of people. Just admit it to yourself. In fact, if you do have a trusted friend or family member that you decide to have this conversation with, my guess is that you're going to find them very receptive and probably even thrilled to help you out a little bit. Just let them know that you're in perfectionism recovery and let them know specifically, be really specific about how they can help you or the things that you are struggling with. Assure them you'll continue to rock the things that you do better than anybody else and they'll be right there with you, and they'll become a partner in helping you get where you want to be. It's a really rewarding feeling for both of you. Now, other people use their perfectionism as sort of a shield, I'll call it, or a barrier. It keeps them from trying, or it keeps them from finishing. They point out the perfectionism as a way to avoid letting the work or their art or their project, whatever it is that they're working on, that's never good enough. They keep it. It's just their way to keep it from getting out into the world, right? Then they never have to really deal with it. The good news is that this is sort of easy to fix. Well, I'll say not easy. It's simple. It may not be easy, and that's just to go ahead and share it. Go ahead and finish the book and publish it. Go ahead and put the website up live. Go ahead and start the podcast, whatever it is that you're talking about doing. I recently heard an interview with John Maxwell. He's an international motivational speaker and author. He's been around for a long time. He's super successful. He's published over 50 books. In fact, I think it's even closer to 100. And sold over 19 million copies. I mean, phenomenal. But in this discussion, he admitted that his first book was terrible. He was even laughing about how bad it was, and looking back at it, obviously, in hindsight, he's like, oh my gosh. And obviously, through his career, he's become a much better writer, and his books and everything are really great. But, but he has had business. And people come up to him and say, hey, I really loved your first book. I've read all of your books, and the first one was really good too. And he's also admitted that writing that first book was a big help in his career path. The bottom line here is that he published the book, and it was great to hear him speak so candidly about it. He admitted, I just got it out into the world. He didn't intend for it to be a bad book, but he couldn't have published book number 2 or book number 52 if he hadn't published book number 1, right? So that's the point I want to make here. He didn't let perfectionism and wanting that book to be the best book ever written in the entire history of books. He was able to go ahead and get it out into the world. So what are you not finishing? What are you, where are you stopping yourself? Are you allowing the idea of being perfect to keep you from moving forward? I believe, and I know for sure, we all have a purpose. You're here to do your thing in your special way, to put your work, your art, your talents to use out into the world. That's what you're here for. And not doing that robs the rest of us from the experience of your contribution. And it robs you of fulfilling your potential. So don't let perfectionism keep you from finishing or even starting. I love starting projects. I love the planning and the strategy, and I like the implementing too. But sometimes, I admit, I get a little run out of steam and lose a little momentum sometimes in the middle of a project. And, many times I just reached out to a trusted friend or someone that can give me good constructive feedback. And almost always I find that, just sort of that fear of finishing it up and getting it out into the world is what's stopping me. And when I can get a plan to sort of recognize that and then go ahead and complete it, it's been very helpful. Don't let your perfectionist tendencies stop you. Be honest with yourself. Be kind with yourself. It's no wonder that we have this issue, because we're also so hard on our own work. And it's really hard sometimes to admit that everything we do isn't perfect. And other people would find it really delightful if we would just give them the ability to see it or share it or be part of it. It reminds me of a quote by Brené Brown in her book called The Gifts of Imperfection. And the quote says, healthy striving is self-focused, as in, how can I improve? Perfectionism is other-focused, as in, what will they think? And what other people think really isn't the point. You're good enough, and your best is good enough. So don't let perfect stop you from being you. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today. On the show notes, I will have a link to John Maxwell's information, and I will also have a link to the book by Brené Brown. It's a great book if you haven't read it. And next up is an interview. The next podcast will be an interview with Melissa Bradley Ball. She is an expert in resilience and the hero's journey. And She's awesome, and the information she shared was really terrific. So I hope you'll join us then. Thanks and have a great day.
Till next time, have fun, be you, and share your sound advice with the world. For more info and show notes, or to connect with Phyllis, go to soundadvicesales.com or on Facebook at Sound Advice Sales.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.